Hello world, welcome to the 216th climate change emergency protest. It is Thursday afternoon or Thursday evening. It's getting on towards dark. January 26 right now. Tomorrow will be January 27th, which is usual Friday protest. Next week will be February 3rd for the 217th climate change protest. This is number 216. I brought a prop here today, and hopefully I'll have enough light left to be able to show you it and what I mean by it. But right now it's sun setting quickly and the wind's blowing pretty hard. So the doomsday clock by the atmospheric scientist or atomic scientist or whatever came out. It comes out yearly and it tells you how, it's a metaphor for how close to midnight we are. And for example, right after the Cold War, it was down to 3 minutes to midnight, somewhere in there. And then after the 1991 Carter settlement with Camp David, Jimmy Carter, Anwar Sadat, and Menachem Begin, I think it was 1978. They did a settlement, and it was a peace accord as well. And then also George Bush in 1991 did a settlement with Putin, or not Putin, Gorbachev, and it was George Bush the first, and that was a START Accords. And what that did is it moved the doomsday clock to 17 minutes to midnight. So that's the farthest way it's ever been. But right now, the doomsday clock is at 90 seconds to midnight. That is the closest it has ever did I say ever been? Okay, are you getting this? This is we're so close to ending ourselves as not only humans but all life on Earth. And they cite the following things, which is a threat of nuclear war due to the war in Ukraine, and in general of nuclear weapons just being tossed around and practiced with, like North Korea. But the main thing is the nuclear war angle. You know, Putin's talking about, threat of nuclear war, and Biden a couple months ago was talking about, nuclear weapons. If he does nuclear weapons, we're doing nuclear weapons. The whole thing. This is maddening, and any leader that says the word nuclear weapon, and the fact that they have nuclear weapons in their arsenal is insane. But any leader that talks about such things should be immediately arrested and thrown in the funny farm, in a loony bin, in a padded cell, or just plain executed for crimes against humanity for uttering such things, in my mind. It's just not right. It's insanity to even suggest such a thing. You cannot win a nuclear war. No one wins. Everybody dies. China has a nuclear. They're like, I don't know how many countries now. It used to be 7 had nuclear weapons. Now it's probably 11. Who knows? So anyways, they are citing nuclear war. They're also citing biotechnology, such as germs developed in labs, gain of function. Sound familiar where we are here? I'm not allowed to say anything about this, but things escaping out of labs either on purpose or by mistake out of places like nearby here and other places that are engaging in biotechnology and things like that, and gain of function, which means you take a virus and then you amplify it and make it even more contagious and things like that. It has more spikes on it and things like that. And then if you went through the recent 3 years, you'll know what I was talking about. Shh, can't talk about this stuff though. Can't talk about the obvious thing when any scientist that looks at it goes, oh, that was human engineered. That wasn't a natural sequence as to what happened. But I didn't say this here. Okay, then the third thing is climate change. They're citing climate change. It's running out of control. And that's why I do my talks every week. I'm not some crazy guy out here just blah, 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 blah. This is an actual thing that's happening. And the United States public specifically is totally uninformed as to what's going to happen. And it's really a disservice what our government is doing. And it's a disservice what our media is doing or not doing. They're not talking about it. They're not reporting it. And it is going to happen. And it's going to be severe. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit here. I can't be totally honest with what's going to happen to everyone. And I don't want to be honest with myself about it. But we got a world of hurt coming, and it's going to be very soon. And the public's going to be very upset with the government if they ever figure out why it's happening. And the fact is that no one did anything about it. And any of these things, 3 things, the nuclear war, biotechnology, or climate change, could end life on Earth. The first 2, nuclear war and biotechnology, can be stopped immediately. You don't need to do that. Stop it. Just stop. Go to your room. Stop playing around. Stop goofing around. Okay, the climate change issue requires a whole worldwide cooperation. And that's what the problem is with this war in Ukraine. And I posted on our local networks, and people are going to misinterpret my thought process on this. But I was saying how They're talking about, well, they are doing it. They're shipping tanks now to Ukraine. How do you think that's going to go? You can't get to peace by having more war, okay? You actually got to talk to each other. If two kids are fighting it out, you're going to let them continue to fight, or you're going to have them talk to each other as to what's going on, and what's going on in your head. Come on now, let's stop right here. Or we can just break out the knives and guns and just shoot each other and get it over with. So my thought is, with the Ukrainian thing, you're going to ship tanks and act like you're not engaged in this. This has become a worldwide effort now at this point. Countries are shipping tanks into Ukraine. Putin's going to amp it up and make it even worse in Ukraine. So this is not going to work. Okay, the only way around this is to have negotiations. And in my thoughts is this is I'm spitballing here. And you know-it-alls who know better than I do will totally disagree with this. But right now, the Donbass region is populated by Russian ethnics, okay? It's largely Russian. They don't want to be part of Ukraine. Make them independent, okay? Donbass region is, this is all they got to do at the talk. Donbass region is clear and independent. Crimea, it's been in Russians' hands since 2014. We won't talk about what happened in 2014, will we? Because you don't want to know what happened in 2014 about an overthrow of a government to put in Zelensky in charge. Okay, so Russians have Crimea. Just let them keep it. Done. In exchange for all that, Ukraine stays free. Leave them alone. We'll pile in on you if you ever mess with the Ukraine again. There, done. Or if you want to have a better solution, which is more insane, is to keep up with these tanks, have more tanks come in, Putin amps up his little game, and then we pour in troops, and Europe pours in troops, and then we have a big Donnybrook and just end it all right away with a couple nuclear weapons being chucked each way, and no one's factoring in the Chinese, who have ample amounts of nuclear weapons at all, and also that could end us, in a heartbeat. So the politicians are saying nothing. They're doing worse than nothing right now about climate change. They're kicking out more oil, gas, and coal, supposedly because of this Ukrainian issue. The media is not reporting any existential threats that's going on right now, and this involves the Antarctic sea ice. It is its lowest extent ever. Antarctica, the part underneath the globe, okay, not the Arctic, the Antarctic. The sea ice, or the sea ice extent is at its lowest point ever. Okay, that's an indication that something is going horribly wrong. Okay, oceans are at its warmest ever, which is why the Antarctic sea ice is its lowest point ever. But also the oceans are suffering from stratification, meaning 2,000 feet down it's still warm, 6,000 feet down still warmer than what it should be. And you end up with stratification, that you end up a totally warm layer with no oxygen in there, less and less oxygen all the time. If something's very hot, a liquid that's very hot tends to not, especially water, tends to not have the ability to hold oxygen and carbon dioxide. So what's going to happen is the oceans will eventually vent off all the carbon dioxide, or a lot of the carbon dioxide, in the atmosphere, which amplifies, because the ocean's been absorbing 90% of our heat, therefore absorbing probably 90% of the carbon dioxide as well. So if they vent off even a tiny bit, 10% of the carbon dioxide, it is a huge amount. The oceans hold a crazy amount of heat and a crazy amount of carbon dioxide, which is also turning into carbonic acid, which is destroying shell life within the oceans itself, and which works on the coral reefs and things like that. So it's acidification of the oceans as well as heating of the oceans, which has all these spin-off effects, not only against ice, but also life in the oceans as well. Ocean stratification, talked about that. Dead zones, the last time I heard there were 14 dead zones in worldwide in the oceans. Probably more than that now. This is probably 3-4 years ago. The rate of change is 10,000 times that, faster than any organism can adapt. Okay, the rate of change of what's going on in the environment here, as you can tell, I'm not standing in snow. We're going to get winter eventually, but this is the end of January. Usually by now, the winter winds are blasting me, and it's cold as all get out. It's probably upper 30s right now, lower 40 degrees Fahrenheit. It shouldn't be like that. So the rate of change is 10,000 times faster than what an ordinary organism can adapt, as if it was evolving, to adapt to a situation. These trees here are dying all over the place. It's crazy what's going on here. I've been running out here for, I don't know, since I was 13, off and on, plus where I lived west of here. But it's been a long time, and we're talking 50-some years, or 40-some years, I'm sorry, 49 years, that I've been running, and I'm seeing these changes going on. And you too can, if you just look out around you and see the changes that's happening around you, wherever you are. It doesn't matter where you are, things are changing horribly. So the rate of change, I said, is 10,000 times quicker than what any organisms can adapt. That's called extinction. It can't keep up. Things are changing faster than what it can keep up. That's called extinction. The heat going into the oceans right now is equal to 600,000 Hiroshima bombs in heat daily going into the oceans. Understand this. That's like 7 Hiroshima bombs in heat going into the oceans per second. Okay, 600,000 per day. Do the math. Somewhere in that region. What's going to end up happening is you're going to end up with billions of refugees in the future once things start changing severely as they are now. And what happens then is you get it'll overwhelm governments, and they won't be able to keep up with all the changes happening around them with all these new influx of people. You can build all the walls you want, but eventually you're going to get pressure from the outside. Someone's going to suffer, the fact that all these here come the geese. Someone's going to suffer the fact that all these billions of refugees, let alone the billions of refugees suffering, and don't have a home to stay in, and it'll cause social unrest. The media in the United States is talking about Taylor Swift and her lawsuit that there weren't tickets available for my concert. Terrible. And Tom Brady, a football player, who's way past, it's time to go. Who cares? That's what they talk about. And then some skier who broke a world record for most world events won in skiing. Okay, so what they're not talking about is lack of diplomacy concerning Ukraine. They're all about war. If you notice, our U.S. media and probably your media in Europe and everything is very warmongerish right now, and they're not asking questions like, hey, why aren't you doing negotiations right now? Jimmy Carter did it with Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin, who are two arch enemies, and he got a peace accord for it. He got the Peace Prize because of that. Gorbachev and Bush the first, the old George Bush, signed the Strategic Arms Talks in 1991. That totally took the world down from inevitable nuclear instability and nuclear war down to more of a survivable situation. Kind of put it in mothballs and things became okay. So, you can't solve it. Obviously, as I said, make the Donbass independent, Crimea goes to Russia, and Ukraine becomes sovereign. So get on with climate change. We cannot do this climate change thing without Russia, China, United States, Europe, all the major polluters of the world actually getting on board and doing something about climate change, severely about climate change, not even something at this point. It has to be severe. We're essentially digging up our own death. Anytime you're digging up oil, gas, and coal, you're digging up the prior things that were involved, carbon dioxide, essentially, once it burns. Were the things that killed off all life on Earth in the previous 5, if not previous 8 mass extinctions, okay? We're in the 6th mass extinction. Some people think we're in the 9th mass extinction. We have risks right now of natural risks. I'm not even talking about man-made risks of everything going on. The wetlands and permafrosts are in danger of venting off massive amount of methane. There's a huge amount of methane and carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide stuck in the permafrost right now. And when that melts, it's going to vent into the atmosphere. And at best, it becomes carbon dioxide. At worst, it becomes those elements. And they're worse greenhouse gases by far than is carbon dioxide. The East Siberian Arctic Shelf, where it's mainly frozen usually in the ocean. You have things called methane clathrates down in there, and it's methane encapsulated in basically ice. And what happens is that if it melts, if it's a shallow sea, which the East Siberian Arctic Shelf is, it vents off into the atmosphere. Now, it might become carbon dioxide on the way up, might get absorbed in the ocean, but most likely it goes as methane, as a burp into the ocean, or continuous flow into the atmosphere, not the ocean. So, as I said, methane is a dangerous greenhouse gas. It's 162 times more potent in the first 2 years than is carbon dioxide. Years 2 through 20, it is 80 times more potent as greenhouse gas. So it's very dangerous. There's a game we're playing here. So you got the methane, permafrost, East Siberian Arctic Shelf. You have the peat bogs in anywhere, but especially in Siberia right now, that burn all the time as zombie fires in the winter. And then in the summer, when it gets droughty, they catch fire like crazy. So you have these things called zombie fires. You also run the risk of taiga fires, which is a ring of trees around the Arctic regions. If you look at the world globe, subarctic regions, northern Canada, for example, Alaska, you got these huge amount of trees, and they're in danger of catching fire. You know what's sad about these geese I've been noticing in the last month or two? They can't figure out where to land. I don't know what's going on. I think the magnetic core is changing in such a way that they don't know where to land anymore. This is their fourth time through. Back in the day, they'd just find a lake and land. And around Gettysburg, there's evidently some magnetic lode south of town that you can watch them. They fly out and around it and then back onto their original course. But these guys will keep flying around in circles probably for the next 10 minutes or so till the sun sets. And they've been at it for the last 20 minutes. And they don't know where to go. And I swear to God, it's the magnetic core of the Earth is just fluctuating around that things are messed up. And their whole way of navigating is messed up. Anyways, that's another issue. Right now, carbon dioxide is 420 parts per million, give or take. And the equivalency is somewhere around 520 parts per million to 750 parts per million if you factor in methane, nitrous oxide, and there's other ones involved too. So you run a huge amount of risk of what's going on right now. So what is happening right now is you run the risk of increasing greenhouse gases, which leads to runaway heating. And this is not the biggest issue coming. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Massive feedback loops are albedo, loss of snow and ice in the north, and also down in Antarctica, Patagonia, any place there's glaciers, which causes heating because instead of a white environment, it becomes darker and it reflects or it absorbs the sunlight, such as the Arctic Ocean. Methane, as I said, several times here, that the methane going in the atmosphere will be devastating. Massive sea level rise and increasing ocean heat will lead to massive sea level rise, not only in the amount of water going in due to glacier melt, but also because thermal expansion. The oceans expand. If you heat water up, it expands in your pot. If you put a egg in there, it'll get covered as you boil the egg because the water expands, and that's thermal expansion. Carbon dioxide, due to ocean heating, will be vented off, as well as the fires in the taiga regions. Forest fires actually contribute nitrous oxide, carbon dioxide, and methane, believe it or not, to the atmosphere. Whenever you have a fire in your fireplace, that's what you're doing. You think, oh, well, it's low level. Well, it affects everything. Everything affects everything. No longer than the trees are absorbing carbon dioxide unless they're deadfalls, but you're cutting down a live tree, and then so you're taking that out of the environment, and then you're burning it. Okay, so you also run the risk of nuclear war. You run a risk of nuclear disasters, such as some nuclear facilities are either built on the coastlines of near the oceans. There's out in California, Diablo Canyon, I think, is right on the ocean, running a risk of not only sea level rise, such as Fukushima, and a tsunami, but it's also running a risk of an earthquake. So that could have deleterious effects on life. So you're having government unrest, risk, and collapse of those governments. Now we're getting into fun stuff. Okay, that was just the lead-in. Okay, right now, so far, the environment has increased 1.1 degrees to 1.3 degrees around the world, the average temperature Celsius since 1880. The United Nations insists that 1.5 degrees is survivable. Well, you're seeing all these effects at 1.3, 1.1, whatever the amount is. How would you think that 1.5 is survivable? Things will be so out of control by then, runaway this and runaway that you can't even name them all the different runaway effects going on. So if 1.5 is unsurvivable, and we've actually passed that, that's my theory as to why we're seeing all these events now, is because they're using the 1880 baseline as 1.1 to 1.3 due to the 2015 Paris Agreement, because they placated the global south by, they originally said 2.0 degrees what we're going for as an increase, and the global south put up a squawk and said we're suffering right now. You can't go with 2 degrees as a goal. You got to go with 1.5. And they said, okay, we'll go with 1.5. But Joe, let's not make it the 1750 baseline. Let's make it 1880. So what they did is they changed the baseline. So originally the baseline was 1750 and 2 degrees, and instead they made it 1880 and 1.5. So we've already passed the 1.5. If you use the 1750 baseline, year 1750, we've already passed it. That's why we're seeing all these effects, and no one's talking about it. No one mentions it, other than a few talkers on here, scientists that I see on here on Facebook and all, talk about it on YouTube as well. And we've already passed it, and it's going to get much, much worse. We've got an event coming. I'm going to talk about that in a second. So Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General, says we're on a path to 2.8 degrees Celsius. Why even bother talking about it? Why don't they say we're on a path to destruction, that there'll be nothing left and utter chaos will develop and everyone will be dead by the time it gets to 2.8? That's based on the United Nations IPCC estimates is what's going on. Now understand this, the United Nations IPCC, when they get together in these COP get-togethers once a year, they're COP28 coming up. Don't even get me started the fact that they're having COP28 in Qatar, and an oil sheikh is in charge of the whole meeting. That'll go well. They'll really talk about climate change and fossil fuels and getting on top of that. But anyways, I digress. Guterres says we're on a 2.8 degree path. This is insanity. I mean, the IPCC is always the lowest common denominator when they come to these agreements. So if you say you want things this way and that person wants things this way and the other person says, I don't want much done, you have to go with them not much done because it has to be universal agreement. Okay, are you understanding this? So 2.8 degrees is a way undersell as to where they're estimating things are going. In reality, we're probably going to go to 5 degrees Celsius, if not 10, if not 16 degrees Celsius, as far as Earth goes. We're going to be baked off the planet. And the rate of change is, you know, some things could survive if it went at a slower rate, maybe, but it's going to go at such an accelerated rate soon that, you know, if we're going 10,000 times the previous adaptation rate, we stand no chance of surviving this. But we can get away from this if we start going on another path and actually mitigate and slow it up somewhat, but we're not intent on doing that. We're too busy worrying about the war in Ukraine. And I tell you, you people that are in your parties, in the Republican and Democrat parties, you're killing us. Okay, you're not demanding a peace talk, and it is possible to have peace talks. George Bush, who was a Republican, the first did it. Jimmy Carter, who was a Democrat, did it with people that you had no sense and no way were they going to make an agreement, but they did it. So you can't allow them to get away with this stuff. It's going to kill us all. And I'm promising you, you're going to look back in this in a year or 2 or 3 at the most and go, shit, he was right. And I don't want to be right. I want you to have an agreement, get on with it, and start getting to climate change, okay? In 3 years, if I'm right, I'm not going to be going, hey, that's great, I was right, told you. No, I'm going to be scrambling for my life if I'm alive at all, okay? So get it together. Okay, so what we're running is probably what's going to happen most likely, unless the Antarctic factors in with their melting sea water, you're going to run into an El Nino event. And right now we're in a La Nina event, meaning the oceans aren't venting that much heat out of the oceans. Okay, what's going to happen in the El Nino? Things flip and the oceans start venting off massive amounts of heat. It can't keep holding on to this amount of heat unless it's dissipated by the Antarctic melting glaciers. But the oceans can't hold that much heat anymore. It's just going to vent off. And it's probably going to happen as a neutral event coming up this fall or winter. It's hard to say because the systems are so messed up. And then by spring next year or the following year, 2024, 2025, 2026, when El Nino comes, it's going to be a super El Nino. And it's going to be an El Nino like we have no idea we've ever seen an El Nino before. Right now, the La Nina events, okay, that's going on right now, are hotter than the hottest El Nino events of 20 years ago. Are you understanding this? El Nino events used to cause a spike in temperature, okay, which they do all the time. When they come about, and they're short-lived, they'll stay around a year or two, usually, unless we go into a permanent CO2 event. But usually the El Nino events, they're very hot times. And the La Nina events are usually very cold times. Well, now things have gotten so bad that the La Nina events the lowest La Nina event is actually hotter than the hottest El Nino event of the last 20 years and previously. Okay, so the lowest La Nina event is hotter than the hottest El Nino event. Okay, this is where we're headed. And when we hit the next super El Nino, it's going to be up here. And it's insanity to think that no one's covering it and the politicians aren't talking about it and no one wants to do anything about it. This is absolute craziness what's going on. And I can't even, I'm going to lose my shit here if I keep talking about this, but You got to get it together and quit letting your parties get away with this stuff. Get the friggin' negotiations done and get on climate change. Okay, that's the two things you have to do. Okay, stand in front of your headquarters. Don't protest about all the other issues going on, because that's going to affect everything else as well. Get in front of your own party headquarters and protest them. And you Republicans aren't that dumb to know that your children are going to die. Okay, not only your children, but you most likely. If you can hear me right now, you're in danger of dying. Okay, so you got to get it together and just quit clowning around, please. So all this is going to happen. The sooner the El Nino comes, the better off it is, because the oceans keep absorbing more and more heat. The more heat it absorbs and the El Nino doesn't come out, when it does come out, it's going to be much, much worse. So every day that goes by, El Nino doesn't come, it builds up more heat. Another day, another week, a month, a year goes by, and when it does come, it's going to be, well, it's going to be super severe. And a lot of bad things are going to happen as a result of it. So, I don't know. As I said, I don't know why Guterres was uttering even 2.8 degrees Celsius, because that's insanity. It's like uttering about, let's chuck some nuclear weapons around. So the path of change that we need to get on is way overdue. I'm not saying give up, quit, go commit suicide, anything like that. Try doing something for once, okay? Please. Everyone's sitting around watching their stupid football games and worrying about Taylor Swift and what's on TV tonight and things like that. Please study YouTube. Go down my webpage on Facebook here and study it. You don't even have to be a friend. I have the page open to the public. I've got tons of articles. There are people on the internet right now on YouTube. Type in climate change. There are so many good scientists. There are so many good speakers. Environmental Coffee House, Paul Beckwith, Kevin Anderson back in the day. Guy McPherson was looked at as being a lunatic. Now he's kind of spot on to what's happening. There are tons of things to get on, and you can get on the internet and on YouTube and figure what's going on. I've got over 10 years of climate change postings, as well as reports and newspaper articles from around the world, and as well as 200 now of 16 of these things. So, this is what's going on right now is people don't want to let go of their lifestyles. Okay, so if you ever heard the phrase "monkey with a hand in a jar," well, this is what's happening. I did this a couple of talks ago, like 100 talks ago. But this is what's happening. You got an orange here, you got a jar, you got a monkey with his hand in a jar, and he can't do both. Either you're going to get your hand out, or you're going to leave your hand in the jar. And if the jar is strapped to the wall and you got a tiger on your back, you got to make a decision real quick as to what you're going to do. Are you going to wait around and keep messing with this orange, or are you going to try to get away from the tiger on your back, which is climate change? Okay, right now, no one wants to change their lifestyle. Governments don't want to change. They want to keep producing oil, coal, and natural gas. They're not willing to change because you people are not involved in making them change. You have to get out and mass protest. That's all that's going to work, okay? Mass protest. It has to be not one and done. It has to be all the time, weekly. Get in front of your party headquarters and start protesting. Monkey, hand in a jar, won't let go of the orange. The tiger's going to kill him. Okay, so this is where we are right now. You got to let go of the orange, get your hand out of the jar, and then worry about the tiger on your back. We need to focus about the tiger, which is climate change, and quit worrying about your little lifestyle and what's going on in the world. Okay, little things like football games and Super Bowls and the World Cup for soccer, for football, and essentially. So please get it together. Do your best to start doing something. The best thing you can do right now is become informed immediately. And quit waiting, and we're not going to survive this. That's all it's coming to. It's down to it. We're not going to survive this, and this is just a fact. I don't know what to tell you. So I don't know how many different ways to say it. Said it all sort of ways, and hope you do your part. I'll catch you next week. That'll be number 217. Sad to say.